The drill and drill press are some of my favorite tools. My first drill, bought at a garage sale over 35 years ago, had a metal body and would randomly shock me as I used it. It took a lot of courage to pull that trigger. Since then, I have owned all sorts of electrical boring and spinning machines. Being able to bore precise holes has given me an ability to add new dimension to my creations. Coupled with homemade dowels, there are so many possibilities that can be imagined. Even though the motion of drilling is very simple, as you hold onto a piece of stock and either push or crank a bit, there are a few really good tips I've learned over the years that help me get the best results. Let me show you 12 quick tips that I use in my shop when it's time to make a hole. Like my last full-size tip video, I've indexed each of the tips so that you can easily move on if you've already seen the tip. I've also got links you'll find in the description that go along with this video. Let's get started.
There is a flame that burns inside myself. I'm above overall.
Drilling straight holes is obviously the most important function of a drill press. Let me give you 3 simple tips that will help you get those beautiful 90-degree holes. Before you drill, check to see if your drill bit wobbles. A really quick fix is to tighten, but not over tighten, the set screw on the side of your drill press. Now check the horizontal play. A nut below the table will allow you to pivot your table. Use a square to set it at 90. But the most important part that I don't ever hear anyone talk about, always lock your drill press table before you use it. When you unlock your table to adjust the height, the weight of the table actually causes it to drop down. If you don't do the simple act of locking your table, you're guaranteeing yourself to be out of alignment. And here's a bonus tip. Use brad point bits and the depth lock to barely poke through the surface. Flip it and drill it the rest of the way. This will preserve the face of your drill table, which can later make the surface uneven. Among all the tools in your shop that are dangerous, the drill press, well, who worries about the drill press? Most of the time, these spinning mechanical tools are completely harmless. With woodworking, they get dangerous when we don't respect steel bit diameter to wood mass ratios. For example, if I use an 1/8 inch drill bit on a 24-inch by 24-inch wide board, no one bats an eye. But if I take that same bit and try to drill into a 3/8 by 3/8 inch scrap, suddenly it becomes more difficult as a decreased mass is much easier to manipulate with the drill bit. This is where the danger comes in. All drill bits are relatively danger-free, so long as the stock we drill into has enough mass to offset the energy and friction of the spinning bit. Some will tell you that it's because of this that you should always clamp stock to the table when drilling. While there is definitely a lot of good advice that comes with clamping, the lazy among us will also resist this practice. If you want to even the mass of your stock, simply add a lever to it. Grab a clamp it to your stock, and now you're giving that spinning steel a little bit more resistance. It's for this reason why you should always keep a clamp next to your drill press. Forstner bits are the best way, bar none, to drill large, clean holes. Most of the time, when we use these bits, we're simply making a hole through a piece of wood. They can become troublesome when we want to drill a hole within a hole. The spur found in the middle of the bit is responsible for giving us accurate holes safely. Naturally, because of the spur, it's important to drill large holes first, followed by the smaller hole. But because larger bits have much larger spurs, when it's time to follow up with a smaller bit with a smaller spur, we've lost both accuracy and safety. The solution to this, when you buy a set of Forstner bits, buy a set of spade bits. These bits have large spurs that center themselves in the holes that were created by previous spurs. The second advantage to using spade bits is that the spurs create a hole that's large enough that when you flip the board over, you can easily drill it the rest of the way. What is the best speed to run your drill press? Simple, as slow as possible, all the time. Forget ridiculous speed charts that complicate drilling holes in a variety of wood types. The most important part of drilling holes in wood is patience. Every drill bit out there will cut a hole, but it's the way that we drill holes that's the most important part. Take time and allow the drill bit to cut. Humans have been drilling holes into wood for centuries. The idea to add a motor to a drill is only a little over 100 years old. And in that time, drill bits have become sharper and better at removing dust and debris than in any time in history. The most problematic thing we can do with drill bits is allow them to get too hot, causing your drill bits to dull faster, which is what happens when we run our bits fast. If you're interested in some experiments that I conducted with speeds and different materials, I created a video that will walk you through the idea that drill press speeds should always be as slow as possible. To drive this point across, I used the rustiest, dirtiest drill bit I could find and made a perfect hole with my drill press on its slowest setting. Drilling a hole doesn't always mean creating an opening on the front and the back side of stock. Sometimes we're looking to drill a hole only so deep. Adding a screw to attach a board is a perfect example of this. We want to create a pilot hole, but only want it to go so deep. A really quick method is to take a piece of painter's tape, set the depth of the drill bit by measuring and adding the tape. I drew up a depth gauge in SketchUp where you can add the drill bit, move the ruler to the correct height, and then add a piece of tape. Besides drill bits, this gauge works really well to set the height of router bits and table saw blades, as well as giving you a thickness to a piece of stock. You can add a clamp to the front of it to lock it in place. If you're using a steel ruler, it works really well with a magnet all on its own. It can be made in 30 minutes and it is nearly impossible to get incorrect readings. The best part, the plans including material tool lists, pattern, and step-by-step instructions are completely free. A common struggle I've heard people rightfully gripe over is getting the hole in the right place when they drill. In this day and age, we are incredibly fortunate to have brad point bits. I'll admit, 20 years ago, I was lining the brad point bits up with the marks on my wood while they were in the drill press. It wasn't until I was introduced to the awl that I realized that you made the mark and then took it to the drill press. Even with this approach, there are still times where I accidentally place the mark outside of the hole. Here's a trick that works really well. As long as you're not clamping a piece of stock down, while the bit is spinning, allow it to center itself inside the hole before you push down. This takes a little bit of practice, but it is nearly flawless when you get it down. Do your drill bits end up like this? And I think most of us think we'll get around to putting them away at the end of the day. Then one day you go to open your drill bit case and you find empty cells, which means a roll in the dreaded bits bucket. What if I told you that in a magical land not too far away, that each of these bits would never get lost and always be at your fingertips? I created what I call the drill bit butcher's block, because just like a knife butcher's block, each of your drill bits have a place unique to the bit. With the shadow box method, it's easy to put them away and know what's missing. But the best part of this magical block is that it can either sit next to your drill press, waiting for use, or on the empty column space that so many drill presses already have. I have 3 different files you can download for free, as well as a step-by-step page on my website. Besides the step-by-step plans, I have materials and tools used to make it so that it's easy to know what you need before you get started. Yes, all free. If you're laying out marks for holes that you need to make with a drill press for your stock, either for screws or for dowels, you could use a ruler and plot each mark, marking the horizontal first and then the vertical. But here's a quick, repeatable way to take a few steps out of your work, and all you need is a scrap board with a mark added to the center and 2 clamps. Grab a tape measure and add your horizontal marks to the stock. The first vertical hole you drill needs to be measured so that it is exactly where you want it to be away from the edge. Drill part of the way, but don't drill through the bottom. Lock the drill press with the bit in the hole and line up the scrap board to the horizontal mark, adding clamps to lock the board down. The position of the clamp stock to the table is not at all necessary. Now, anywhere along the line you move your board, you are exactly the distance away from the edge. Happy drilling! If you or your brother have ever left an indelible mark on your drill press table, I don't need to remind you of how disappointing it is. It'll remind you every time you use it in the future. For those new to woodworking, drilling into the table happens when we don't set the horizontal table to the right vertical plane and we miss the hole. This movement is possible due to the play in the column that holds the rack and pinion that the table travels on. Normally, to keep myself safe from drilling into the table, I crank the spindle down and make sure that I clear the hole. Today, we're going to make it so that we can check that our table is lined up correctly without needing to bring the spindle down. We'll first start with the table lifted as high on the column as we can make it. With a metal dowel or a very straight wood dowel chucked in, we'll check to make sure that the dowel is in the dead center of the hole and add a mark in the center of the table locking clamp as well as the column. We'll lower the table and add another mark, using the locking clamp we added last time as a reference. With a straight edge, we'll link the 2 marks. Now when we lift or drop the table, we'll know that where the clamp mark touches the vertical line we made, we're safe. Finding and drilling the center of dowels is difficult. I've talked about the double dowels jig I've made in previous bite-sized videos, but I've got an even easier way to find and drill the center out of a dowel. And all you need is a piece of scrap wood and a drill press to do it. First, always make sure your drill press table is locked. We'll need a Forstner bit that's the size of the dowel that you plan on drilling. I have a 3/4 inch dowel that I'd like to drill the center out of with a 3/8 bit, so I'll need a 3/4 inch Forstner bit. We'll clamp the scrap wood down so that it's secure on the drill press table and use a 3/4 inch bit. After I've drilled a hole out, and we'll be careful not to drill too far so we don't drill into the table, I'll insert my 3/4 inch dowel, not moving the scrap piece of wood on the table. Now I'll replace the 3/4 inch Forstner bit with the 3/8 bit I need to make the second hole. I'll start the drill press again and add the hole. The dowel might try to spin, so I recommend using a pair of pliers to hold the dowel in place. But there you go, a dead centered hole inside of a circle. If you're looking to drill a hole in a long vertical piece of stock, you might be tempted to use a drill press. But let me show you how a hand drill, yes, a hand drill, is the way that you want to go. Okay, so no, don't grab a hand drill and start drilling. Instead, we'll divide the project in half. We'll start with 2 parts of the stock. With a table saw, we'll cut a channel that is slightly smaller than the hole we want to drill. This involves finding the center, raising the blade half the distance, flipping our stock, and cutting again. When we get both parts cut on the table saw, we'll glue them together. You can use a couple carriage bolts on either side to keep things lined up. Now that things are dried, we'll move on to the hand drill. Clamp your stock to the table or a vise and use a long drill bit. Trust me, it is nearly impossible for the drill bit to wander from the channel we created, as the drill bit will automatically self-center itself in the cut we made. One thing to note, if you're having a hard time getting your hole started, use a step bit to drill the diameter of the hole you're looking for before drilling the rest of the way. My drill press is as accurate as drill presses can be, but vertical holes, where we allow the bit to travel freely in a defined space, is better done with a hand drill. Poplar and oak dowels, while expensive, are easy to come by where I live. But domestic woods like walnut and maple are a good drive away, and forget about pawduke and purple heart or any other imported woods. In Bite Size 18, we used a lathe and a set of wrenches, modified to cut larger dowels in the lathe. In a recent project I was working on, I needed narrower dowels and found the wrenches work just as well with a hand drill. Like before, I'll grind the sides so that the inside profile has sharp edges instead of the rounded edges they came with. Now I'll take a square piece of stock that's just slightly larger than the insides of the dowel I want. I find using a table with a dog hole in it the easiest method to accomplish this. You might have burns when you're done, but that's okay as the profile is just slightly larger than the actual size. Use a piece of sandpaper to clean things up. Still too large? A microwave works to reduce them a little more, and they'll expand later as they regain moisture, which is good. This is a great tip for dowels that fit in the drill chuck. Just make sure you use something for your dowel wrenches like this Boeing T9 to keep them rust free. If you find the hole you drilled is too small, you might be tempted to grab the right drill bit and make it larger. If you're using twist drill bits, for the most part, you will have some tear out, but it's not impossible to do, and holes can be cleaned up with a countersink bit. Brad point bits, on the other hand, due to the sharp edges, are a fatal choice. My go-to for holes smaller than a 1/2 inch is a step drill bit that has wide steps. Tapering bits do not work for shallow holes or for larger Forstner bits, so we need to be a little more clever. To fix these mistakes, we'll use a combination of holes. First, grab a piece of scrap wood that's at least 3/4 of an inch thick. We'll drill halfway into the board with the size we made a mistake with. Now switch to a 1/16 inch bit and drill the rest of the way through the board. We'll flip the board over and use the larger correct size Forstner bit or Brad bit to drill to the first hole we made. Now you can use clamps and flip the small hole size down, lining it up with the previous hole. With a larger bit, we can safely drill out our large hole.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope I've given you a few ideas. If so, leave a comment down below and let me know. I really want to give a big thanks to my patrons that help keep the bits spinning. Thank you.
Michelle B., Keith Current, William L McNally, Jerry Adams, Tommy QR, Zach Finch, Rich Lightfoot, and Tutor the Barbarian. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that bell. And I thank you so much for being a part of my shop. Please leave a comment below. Come find me on Instagram at Make Things with Rob. And remember to keep making things.
There's a flame that burns inside myself.